a platform matching for fundraising startups and investors around Europe. Welcome, Friso. It's great to see you here today, pre-Christmas. So I guess we're very busy, but thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
That's perfect. So could you please maybe introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us, I guess we'll have to start a bit earlier with Kiesel, right? Before Startup Fountain, right? That was your first company. So could you tell us a little bit about it as well?
Yeah, sure. Before Startup Fountain, I was a co-founder of Kiesel together with a friend of mine. And Kiesel was a physical product, so a hardware product to protect people while using public Wi-Fi networks. So if you talk about it in a bit more technical terms, it was effectively like a portable VPN router, but we really promoted it as an easy-to-use one-button solution that would protect you online. The use case would be people would be traveling, going to hotels or on airports, and the Wi-Fi is not safe. They could use our device as a sort of bridge. You connect your laptop and your phone to the Kiesel device, and then the Kiesel device to the Wi-Fi in that public space. So we did that. It was really like a hardware business. We didn't have any experience in hardware, so it was it was quite a challenge that we worked on, but it was also a really good learning experience.
That's a cool device. I could definitely see myself use it.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to do it?
It was actually me and my co-founder. We were colleagues in the past, so we had worked together. I was before Kiesel working on a different project that was sort of not sure, was it a startup or was it just like a more of a side project? And he approached me at one point, that friend of mine, and said, "Hey, I have this idea for an easy to use VPN solution. Would you want to join on this project and see if we can bring it to life?" And at that point, it was really something that we did on Saturdays, writing about it and making a presentation, which we would use in the future as a sales pitch or as an investor pitch, and just figuring out what would the product look like, how would it work, what would pricing be, like a lot of questions that we asked ourselves, and we started answering on these Saturdays. And that's really how it started, from the idea of a buddy of mine, actually. And I just went along, and both of us didn't have any hardware experience, and we were sort of naive. But I think for a lot of business founders, naivety is a great source to dare to leap into the unknown. Because if you know what comes afterwards, you might be too scared or too frustrated about the amount of time it will take. But along the journey, it was really nice, to get started on this project.
Right, and you mentioned pitching and going to investors, but eventually, I guess you went to for crowdfunding, right? You launched on Indiegogo.
Yeah, that's right. So we had an advisor on our team who had done an Indiegogo campaign before us. So we launched our campaign in 2015. It was the time when Kickstarter and Indiegogo were still relatively new. You would get press if you had a campaign, people would like it. And it was just like nowadays it's become very common, but I think still for like hardware products, it's a very sensible way to go about it. You need quite a bit of capital to get started, and that way you can prove the market and raise some capital. And I think like after the initial period where we were spending like Saturdays working on the project, at some point, I think it was like in the month of February, we really launched the company and started going at it full time. And that's when we also looked for one investor to help us basically make a good video for the Indiegogo campaign, make a sort of a mock-up, like a product that we could use in the video to have like a proof of concept. So it was an investor where we raised like 40,000 euros, so like a very small amount, but sufficient to get us to the launch of the Indiegogo campaign. And it was also like a like this key moment where we thought if it doesn't work, then it fizzles and then we're done. And if it does work, then we can go on this journey. So it was like, I think in July, something like that we launched. So the Indiegogo campaign. So the company started in February. In July, the launch of the campaign. And then after like 2 weeks, we were at around 150K of pre-orders, worth of pre-orders. And yeah, on Indiegogo, you can effectively raise as long as you want. So like on Kickstarter, like a 30-day period, and then it's closed. Like Indiegogo, you can keep stretching it. So we ended up like raising for a full year, for 12 months, and raised over €1 million that way. And that was like the vital amount of capital that we needed to really go into China and to figure out how to build this product.
That's amazing. But what do you think contributed the most to such a success?
There's something about hardware that makes it. There's a desirability that you can create that I think is tough with just a software startup. So the product looked really nice. People were just like eager to get their hands on it. You can sell it at a discount. So there were like a number of these things. It was also a time where awareness about online privacy was more of a thing. It was also like a bit later, you had Cambridge Analytica with Facebook, but already at that time, it was more and more front page news that Wi-Fi was insecure. So I think the timing was right for at least like a niche of users to be interested in such a solution. And we saw like, obviously like on these websites, it's very male dominant, the audience, but we also saw a lot of people buying it for their parents, for example, and knowing that their parents were concerned about the state of the internet. They were sometimes a little bit clumsy setting up things or being securing themselves. So this was an easy solution. So I think we hit a number of right notes that triggered people to purchase the product. And I think after us, there were also like a bunch of other companies that were also working with privacy, VPN kind of hardware solutions. Ours was really like a portable solution, so it was battery powered. So I think that was also something that set us apart a bit more. And I think it just came together. And I think on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, you see these waves of companies that have similar propositions. And I like to think that we were leading that wave, but there's also been like that. There's a lot of amazing backpacks on Kickstarter, amazing like 20 purpose jackets, and like anti-stick pans, knife sets. It's like there's like these categories that where it's just like new companies keep selling those kind of products. We were in the privacy wave, I'd say.
Okay. So obviously, you were pretty successful. You raised money, you went to manufacture in China. And I guess that's when a few of the challenges have started, right? You were looking for more investment, and then you also had a bit of a challenge managing the cash flow. So what were the particular challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so there were, it started like with technical challenges. Like the technical challenges were stuff like the quality of the Wi-Fi connection, for example. People are used to having like an iPhone or a MacBook, and when they look for Wi-Fi networks, then they see like a long list of Wi-Fi networks. So when they were looking with our device for nearby Wi-Fi networks, they would see fewer. And that was just something that we were struggling with. And like at Apple, there's like 400 engineers working just on antennas and Wi-Fi quality, and we were like a tiny team. So we were trying to just get to a sufficiently okay-ish level where you would not just see like two Wi-Fi networks that were really next to the desk, but that you would actually have some range. And a challenge like that, we both weren't engineers, so we both had more of a business background. There was something that there was quite a learning curve, finding the right antenna manufacturer in China. We had some great partners there that really helped us navigate the ecosystem where you can build that sort of stuff. but it just like took time. And every time you need more time, you have people on the payroll, it eats up out of your runway. And with the situation we were in, and a lot of crowdfunding campaigns are in, it's like you cannot sell more products if you haven't shipped your first batch yet. There's companies that have tried it and they've received huge backlash. So we had about 5,000 pre-orders. So if we had sold, for example, on Amazon new devices without having delivered the 5,000 pre-orders, then you would just like get a lot of negativity in the Amazon reviews, and it would also break your brand. So in that sense, it was like you really had to make sure that you were able to finish that product, and that delay where you have money burning not only on the contracts that you close in China, but also on your employees. That was just like something that pushed us into needing more funding. And next, besides that, so there's the delay effect, but there's also like you have to order certain quantities in China to be able to get access to certain factories, and ordering large enough quantities is one thing, but then also like when do you get the revenue out of the products that you order? So when we delivered the first 5,000 units that we sold on Indiegogo, we then were pre-ordering at the factories, paying factories to order components. Then the factories would make the parts that they used for our product. Then we had 6 factories that put their stuff together in our assembly hall. We would assemble the products, then we put it on a boat. The boat takes about a month to get to the US or to Europe. Then you put it into retail channels. So you put it in a store. So like in the US, we were in Brookstone. It was an airport retail store. And then you would get paid when the store sold it to a customer, and only then would be like 60 days later. So from the beginning, where we had to pay the factories, to when we would receive the money from a sale, there was easily like 6 months in between. So it required us to get like a lot of capital to be able to basically facilitate that paying that amount of money while waiting for the revenue to come out of it.
Wow. Okay. And have you ever had an experience with retail or with hardware before that?
No. So we were just like figuring everything out, learning a lot. We really learned the skill of just asking everybody for advice. I think that's just such a, it sounds a bit cheesy, but such a powerful thing. Like building up this network of other entrepreneurs or investors or advisors, building relationships with other companies and just asking them for help. So for example, manufacturing in China, we knew that the product had certain components that made it very similar to the components that are in a phone. So we, in Amsterdam, where we're based, there's a Dutch phone company called Fairphone. They make a sustainable phone. So they were the nearest to us that made something phone-like that we needed. So we just contacted people at Fairphone. And in general, people like to help you when you have sort of when you're on an adventure. So they really connected us with some people in Hong Kong that were helping them at the time with their supply chain. And that way we got into China, and I think we contacted them several times afterwards. If there was like a patent troll coming for us, then we would reach out to them saying, "Hey, have you dealt with this before? Can you help us?" Or also like investors or any hardware challenges. So it was like always ask around for help. And with retail, it was the same. We hooked up with some retail advisors that helped us get into retail channels in the US and in Europe, that knew how you had to adjust your packaging to not only be nice for the direct to consumer channel, but also for retail. So there's like a lot of stuff that you learned. But we were also working on it for 6 years. So we had some time that we could spend on it.
But that's a great insight. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask, especially if we're talking about some conjoined industries or even competitors, they're never going to help us. But I guess you're right. When you ask just genuinely for advice in your situation, then people are most likely to help you. But you mentioned that you needed more funding in this situation. So what strategies did you use to approach your investors? Because it obviously was a bit of a tough situation, right? You had to probably get someone who would understand how hardware works, how
Yeah.
retail works, and you were caught in the middle of it.
Yeah, so also that was something that we really had to learn, and I think a lot of founders, first-time founders, have to learn that the hard way as well, right? Like who do you approach? Where can you find them? If they say no, not yet, what does it mean? There's this whole language that they speak, and there's this hidden agenda of investors. So I think something that was unusual for us, it was that we had that Indiegogo campaign. So we raised $1 million, but we hadn't shipped the product yet. So we were under the assumption that having raised $1 million would put us in the league that we would be able to go to Dutch venture capital funds to get more money, because we had proven the market. We thought that it was some product market fit or something along those lines, that it was interest. And it just felt like every room we walked into at a startup event, we would always have the highest revenue number. It's not like a bragging contest, but it was just very often people were surprised how much we raised. So we thought we were ready for venture capital investments. Also talking with a lot of other companies that were on Indiegogo and Kickstarter. A lot of them are US based. So we learned from some of them that they had raised $6 million before launching the campaign on Kickstarter, for example. So we just felt that we had been very lean. We just had a 40K investment from a single person in the Netherlands, got to $1 million of investment. And then we started talking with VCs, and it was difficult to understand what the problem was, right? Why weren't we closing the money? But it turned out that just having that peak of the Indiegogo campaign and then no revenue for a while we were figuring out to manufacture is just something that a lot of investors are not used to. They really want to see a recurring SaaS growth curve of revenue that provides some comfort and some predictability in the sales process. And we didn't have any predictability in the sales process. We had exhausted a launch channel like Indiegogo, and now we were going to prepare for retail channels, but we didn't have any proof on that. But at the time, we just didn't know. So after a few months of trying with VCs, we decided this is not working. Let's go back to angel investors. Let's go for smaller tickets and see if we can raise money there. So we did raise from a few angels, so about $500,000 at that point. So that got us a bit further at where we were able to manufacture, to ship the products. We got a bank loan as well. We also did an equity crowdfunding in the US. The bank loan was always something weird. We felt like VCs don't want to give us money, but they're supposedly the risk takers, whereas the bank loan was something that banks don't give you loans based on risky propositions, right? It's sort of so it was this counterintuitive situation, which unfortunately for the Netherlands is especially back then was not so weird. Dutch VCs don't have a very strong risk appetite. They really like you to already have figured out how to scale the company, and then they step in.
Right.
So it was just a lot of challenges finding money. And it was when we did the equity crowdfunding was also we had a US subsidiary, so another company in the US, and we were able to raise an equity crowdfunding round on that, which was also unusual and weird. And all these things, we just didn't do them because we like to do them that way. It's just that we didn't have any other way to get money in. So it was just constant struggle for years of finding money to be able to manufacture and pay the factories and to accept that cash flow delay that we had. So it was money was the big struggle all the time.
Right. It's quite a story. I mean, you tried it all, and I guess it's also about what you just said earlier, being a newbie, being the first-time founder. You just go head first, you learn on the job, and you also don't really have you don't really have any uncertainty. what if I go there? You don't feel like it could be a problem or it could be a mistake because you've never tried it before, right? So everything is on the plate for you, right? There is nothing you want to skip. But yeah, that unfortunately, I know that it led to eventual closure of Kiesel. So what do you think was that last nail in the coffin, and what would you do now, looking back, to avoid it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. Like, what could we have done differently? And it was, I'm smiling a little bit now, but back then it was really extremely stressful and
Sure.
not a nice experience, which unfortunately a lot of founders go through, but it's not talked about enough. I think that the thing that we were encountering these sales opportunities that were talking about thousands of products. So on Indiegogo, we sold 5,000, so that's around €1 million worth of revenue. We, over the lifetime, sold another 5,000 through different channels. But we were also talking with these opportunities where they said, hey, we want to buy maybe 5,000 units at once, which would be a deal of €1 million. And to be able to participate in those deals, we had to pay our factories a large amount,
Right.
because we weren't able to get customers to pay upfront for the product. So we needed basically to purchase, get money to purchase that amount to be able to participate in those sales deals. And as it turned out, like, we at some point we had an opportunity with Amazon to launch on Amazon Prime Day. And they told us they would sell out 5,000 units in a single day. Now, well, we weren't able to get 5,000 units in the warehouse because we didn't have that money yet. But with that story, we talked with a number of rich people and asked them, hey, will you borrow us money for a short-term loan so that we can manufacture for deals like Amazon, where they can sell 5,000 units in a day, which doesn't sound unusual or illogical, because Amazon has, like, I don't know, like 500 million email addresses. So if they just send like one newsletter, then for sure you're going to sell 5,000 units. So when we had that discussion, we got a lot of loans that we needed to purchase from the factories, and eventually turned out that we weren't able to get the sales deals that we thought we were able to get. So like with Amazon, it was not a contract, so it was just like a conversation that we had with the account managers, some emails back and forth where they promised us a spot on Amazon Prime Day. And they said they were going to sell 5,000. We said, we only have 1,000. Then they say, okay, well, give us 1,000 units in the warehouse, and you're going to feel sorry for not selling more, of not having more products than 1,000. Well, when Amazon Prime Day happened, then we were refreshing our screen all day, looking at the analytics board of Amazon. And it turned out that we eventually sold 70 units. So there we were with like a huge amount of debt in the company, with a lot of inventory, but no big sales event that we were able to nail. So there were a number of those kind of events where we were just loaded up on debt with a lot of inventory, but no way, no channel where we could get revenue out of the product fast enough to pay back the creditors where we borrowed the money from. So eventually one of the creditors got disappointed first, and then angry that we weren't able to pay him back. And that was eventually the nail in the coffin. But yeah, like if he hadn't done it, then I don't think we would have really gotten to much bigger sales. So we were trying for also to sell the company, looking for big subsidy grants, like looking for ways to make it work. But we eventually had exhausted all the possibilities that we could think of, and still had like angry creditors that wanted us to close the company. So that's how it ended.
Right. But well, rightfully you call it still a good experience, because I guess that's what led you to start a fountain, right? Because you tried pretty much everything on earth regarding investment.
Yeah, so over the years we had reached out to about 300 investors, got about 5 times a yes. then also the bank loan and the equity crowdfunding. So like with those 5, I felt like we needed to reach out to 60 investors to get one yes. And I think it's just something that we very much underestimated, the amount of time needed for fundraising, but also what I hear from other founders is that you feel that if you focus on getting product market fit, on making something that your customers really love, then it feels like that's the job, but that's not the only job you have. You need to also make sure that your company stays around and is able to survive and to have that runway to figure out how to get to product market fit. So raising from investors is something that I think very few founders like doing. It's a necessity that is part of the job, and it's something they underestimate. And there's just like a world of intransparency there. So all the first-time founders have to figure out like who are the investors, and in particular like angel investors. Not all of them are known. A lot of them are sort of hiding and don't want to be known as angel investors, or don't want to be publicly discovered, but want to be introduced through their network. But also the other way around, you see a lot of VCs and angel investors. They're doing the walks and going to all the universities to figure out if something exciting is happening there. They're going to the demo days of accelerators to figure out what's new there. So like there's these two groups that are just looking for each other all the time. And there was not a very obvious place where they could meet online. So during the COVID period, I was tinkering with this idea. We were going bankrupt with Kiesel. It was a long, lengthy administrative process. So I had time to play around with some other idea. And the idea for Startup Fountain was really to make it a discovery platform where startups can announce that they're fundraising and investors can go there and figure out if there's anything interesting for them. So it's a marketing tool for startups that are fine with raising publicly.
Okay, so what is the goal? What is the main goal for the Startup Fountain, especially in your journey as well?
Yeah, so sort of my main goal, like the big audacious, hairy kind of goal that you're supposed to set, is that I really want to get to the point where if you have a good proposition, that you put your startup on there and that you get sufficient meetings with investors that allows you to close the round, and that you don't need any other channels to approach investors. You can just list yourself, get the meetings you need, get sufficient yeses, and then you're done with the round. So that is where I want to get to. So yeah, that's the goal.
That's great. I think, well, especially during the COVID, I think, again, like you said, you had a momentum, right? What is the trend now? Do people still tend to try and find investors or startups online, or it is more about the network because offline events are going back?
Yeah, so it's interesting that it's both now. So what has changed because of COVID is that it seems like a lot of investors are more open to meeting for the first time online and also investing abroad. So a lot of Dutch investors are now also investing throughout Europe. There's no longer the restriction that you need to be geographically near the founders. It's always nice if you have one local investor that is sort of the touch point for the entire investment group that is investing in the startup, so that there's someone who can be near the startup. But I think a lot of investors, VCs and VCs and angels are nowadays investing much wider around the world than they did 4 years ago. So which is amazing. Yeah, it gives just like more opportunities for any startup wanting to raise.
That's great. And it's also good that you mentioned that you were building around COVID, right? You didn't really have much time doing that. And as far as I know, you used quite a few no-code tools like Airtable, Zapier, Webflow, right? So why those?
Yeah, so it's just something that I found out I really like doing. So I studied economics, so I'm not a developer. But with Kiesel, we were using Shopify as our web shop. And that was sort of like in my student days, I played around making websites and stuff, but nothing professional. And with the Shopify web shop, it became a more integrated solution that I was making. So you have all these apps that you can connect to the Shopify web shop. You integrate with Stripe. You have your email campaign that is connected to it. Orders are coming out of Shopify, going to your warehouse. So there's a bunch of things that you can nowadays connect so easily with tools like Zapier or within the ecosystem of a platform like Shopify. And I just really enjoyed building that Shopify web shop and connecting all the tools and automating the processes. That afterwards with Startup Fountain, I started just looking online for tutorials on what you could make with these kind of tools. And there's an amazing guy, Connor Finlayson, who has made the Unicorn Factory, and he has done some talks and has a great YouTube channel where he explains exactly how he built that marketplace and which tools he used and how he does it. So it just gave me the idea, hey, I can build something similar too, and it's just like super addictive that you're by yourself able to do all that. It's the power that normally only a developer gets. And I see myself a little bit more as a marketeer / product guy. And now I can do it myself. So I no longer need to make mock-ups and tell it to the developer that he needs to do it. And then when I get a result, I need to test it or get a tester to test it and figure out. I can now all do it by myself. And it's not perfect. There are some restrictions, but there's so much possible and so quickly that you can just iterate much faster in the beginning, I think, by yourself than if you have an entire team. And if you have, like, if everything is possible, like there is with regular code, then you very quickly become needy that you want that button to be exactly there and to have that kind of behavior. And with no code tools, I tend to be a bit more flexible and just think about what I want to achieve, what I want to test, what kind of assumption. And if there's a template that allows me to, or a library that allows me to do it very quickly, then I just use that, and I don't need the button to be there if the template has it there. So it's,
okay, so you're more able to just focus on the business logic, right? Yeah. Okay, but have you felt any of the limitations of the no-code platform? Or not yet?
But it's always also an interesting challenge to figure out either, like, is there some kind of solution? Like with Zapier, there's thousands of tools you can connect to other tools. So is there something out there that it's searching for the right solution, but it's also searching for, is there a different way to test this assumption? So if you're really testing assumption whether your customer wants this kind of solution, then there's very often what Paul Graham also says, like stuff that doesn't scale. They want you to test things out before you start building the fancy application that does it all. And I think with a lot of the no-code tools, you're in a perfect position to test things out that don't scale. And once you want them to scale, there's either the no-code solution, but you could always also find like some people to write custom scripts for your no-code solution. So like a lot of no-code solutions allow you to also insert scripts if you want more complicated stuff. And then there's also platforms like Bubble, which I haven't used, but they go really, really broad in what it can do. So then there's really hardly any limitation left.
Okay, and obviously you have a lot of startups listed on Startup Fountain, right? So do you see a trend of using this kind of tools?
Like the no-code tools, you mean? Or
yes.
I do know of some startups that use it for part of their business. So it also allows you to start working towards your MVP if you don't have a CTO in your team. So if you don't have a developer in your team, but just like, I don't know, a sales kind of person and a product kind of person, and you're good to go nowadays, as long as one of them really likes doing it. I've seen more and more startups using the tools at the early stage, or even maybe just use part of it in their like Webflow is a great solution for front end. or Y code is also something that you can use for front end. And maybe your back end is sophisticated and custom built, but then at least have the front end done in an easily adjustable way where you don't need to waste your valuable developer time, but you can do it yourself.
Any skepticism from the investors towards the tools?
Yeah, well, they like to invest in those tools. I think that is something also like companies like Retool that really position themselves as internal tools for the big corporates. They're very popular with investors. So investors do acknowledge the fact that this making a larger group on the planet able to create applications is something that is very powerful. But at the same time, a lot of investors still have the old thinking that you need to have a CTO on board. And obviously, if you want to build like infrastructure that can handle tens of millions of customers and visitors, sure, then you need something more than no-code tools. But if you're working at the early stage, figuring out your MVP, trying to get to, I don't know, like 20K in revenue per month, that is something that you can do with no code perfectly fine.
Right. Okay. So, obviously Startup Fountain has been around for a bit now. So how has it evolved since launch?
Yeah, so I started with the idea that I was that we were working with some service providers that helped you with introductions to investors. So when we were doing that with Kiesel, I just thought like the only real thing that you're getting me is access to your network. It's really you opening your address book or the phone and telling me like, I know these investors, can I connect you to them? And doing that, there's were all these lists floating around on the internet, and they still are, and on LinkedIn, like a list of 500 investors in this, a list of 2,000 VCs, and then very often those lists are a bit messy or they're not perfect for you. So I started thinking, hey, I just want to build a list that is useful for Dutch startups. As a startup, you look at three things. You look, is the geography right? Is the ticket size right? And is the thesis right? So we were looking for Dutch for investors that are investing in the Netherlands in cybersecurity and hardware, and for tickets like 500K, for example. That would be the only thing that we needed to know. But to get that, we were looking through the lists, visiting websites to confirming that it was indeed their thesis. It was just like a lot of manual work that a lot of startups do, making their long list of target investors. So that was the first idea, was just like make that list for the Dutch startups to have somewhat of a niche approach, just where it was easier to get to a high quality product than doing it for the entire world. But then when I had that list, I noticed that it became the other way around, was actually more exclusive. That the list that I was making of a lot of investors is just like something that others have done or are doing or are floating around. But the other thing, like which startups are currently raising, especially in the early stage, where I'm focusing on, that is something that is that is a bit harder to find. So you have the big databases like Crunchbase or Dealroom or CB Insights, and you can find startups there. But those startups tend to get into those databases after they've completed the first fundraise. So like the earliest stage, they don't appear there yet. These companies rely on scraping to get information in there, whereas the companies with me, they provide their own data points. So like with Crunchbase, you would need to guess like how much revenue does this startup have. And VCs, they all tell me that they go to LinkedIn, they look, there's 12 employees working for the company, then they must have some revenue. Whereas with me, the startups just tell me what kind of revenue they have, and the investors can see that information. So I think for the earliest stage, I have a sort of a proposition that is hard for the others to beat.
Okay, so I guess you've answered the question already, but we do have a question from the audience. First of all, interesting and super inspiring story. What makes this platform unique? What is the secret sauce?
So there's two audiences. So for investors, the uniqueness is really in that early stage and data provided by the startups. So an investor can filter if they want a fintech startup with 5K MRR, where the cap table is not destroyed yet, so where founders have more than 90% of the shares, for example, or 80% of the shares. And that is the kind of search that you cannot do on Crunchbase or Dealroom. So that is something that really makes them able to zoom in on their exact needs and get the startups they want. And the other way around for startups, I think there are more ways to get in front of investors, but it's just like a nice welcome extra way to get more meetings with investors. And I think what I notice now in the dynamic of the platform is that I need many more investors than I need startups on the platform to be balanced. So startups, they have an urgency, sometimes desperate to get to the meetings, whereas investors, they only have urgency when they feel that it's a competitive deal, but otherwise they're fine waiting for 6 months to see if you get any further. So there's also, they're more laid back, they respond less. So the balance on the platform needs to be that I have many more investors than startups in order to be able to get sufficient meetings for the startups. And still, like startups, like not everybody gets introductions, right? So I've stopped thinking that I need to be able to build something that helps all startups get meetings, because that's just like not reality. Like reality is that there's good startups and there's not so good startups. There's startups that have an attractive proposition for investors and there's that don't. And I just need to make sure that if you have a good startup that really matches with the investor needs, that you then get like all the meetings that you need. And the others can maybe learn from those startups and fine-tune their pitch, but it shouldn't be my goal to help every startup get investment.
Okay, so how do you ensure the quality and the fit of the introductions?
Yeah, so with the startups, I do filter the startups before allowing them on the platform. So I do want to be an early stage platform, so you don't need revenue to be featured on the platform or in a newsletter. But if you don't have revenue, then you at least need either a solid team. So that is a team that has some interesting backgrounds that make it believable. So if you have some quantum physics team that is doing a quantum physics startup but doesn't have revenue and has a not so great looking website, then I still think it is a valuable startup to put on the website. If you don't have a quantum physics team and you don't have revenue, then at least you need to have like a website that is good looking, where the proposition is clear, that shows that you really do work on building a bigger business than just something that you created on a Saturday morning. So it's either have a good team, revenue, or a good looking website / app. So that is sort of the minimum requirement. And then you can basically list on the website, and I put you in the newsletter to investors. I don't filter the propositions that I share with investors. So the way I currently do it is every Tuesday I send out a newsletter with 3 or 4 startups to the investors, and it's up to the investors to reach out to the startups through the platform. And that way, what I've noticed is that it's sometimes hard for these matches to be correct all the time. Like a startup might say, well, these are the 5 categories that I belong to. And I might be a SaaS, like a SaaS HR B2B platform. And then the investor might have like different terms that they use, and they still might be interested. So basically what I just now do, and as long as the quantity isn't too large, like with 3 or 4 startups per week, the investors still really like to scroll through the email to see in a minute if there's something there for them, and then they go on with their day. But if I had like an email with 100 startups every week, then I need to have a more precise method. But so far it's sufficient.
Right. Okay. So you're still figuring it out as well, right? It's still a startup.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I don't need to solve something that I don't need to solve at the moment. So as long as when I have like 100 per week, then I need to have that solved, because otherwise you don't get the attention on the startups that you want. But right now it's fine like it is. I can deal with
Okay.
imperfection very well, it turns out, at this stage.
Yeah, I think yeah, at this stage, absolutely, this is something that everyone deals with. But could you maybe share a success story that happened through Startup Fountain?
Yeah, so there's a bunch. So like one thing that is tricky is that I don't track the investment that is made. So it's really a connecting an introduction platform. So the investor reaches out to the startup. I introduce them via email, automated, and then it's up to them to continue the conversation, have meetings, have coffee, get a term sheet, sign it, and receive money in the bank account. And that part of the process I don't see.
Mhm.
And I only notice when a startup wants to be removed from the platform, or when they announce publicly that they're raised, or that I run into them at some event. A lot of them are Dutch startups, so I run into a lot of them. And then they tell me that they raised money. So there's been a number of them. They've raised from angels or from early VCs. One story that I liked as well is that a startup was rejected by an analyst of a VC. And then afterwards they discovered Startup Fountain, so he put his startup on there, and then the partner of that same VC reached out and wanted to talk with them. And that is just, it shows like how yeah, sort of how messy this world of matching is also, and why shooting with hail the way I do doesn't hurt. Like you never know what you're gonna figure out. And like a lot of the investors, so there's around 600 investors that are signed up for the newsletter. For a large majority of them, I don't know what their thesis is. Because if I ask them a lot of details, then investors they bail on signing up. They don't want to reveal necessarily everything. So investors that sign up for the newsletter get to optionally create a more detailed profile. So I know of a bit over 100 investors, I know in more detail what they want. But a lot of the 600, I don't know what they specifically want. And what I've seen a number of times is that I send out pitches from startups in a specific niche, and it turns out that there's a bunch of guys that have, or girls that have experience in that niche. So like in the mobility or in some nautical businesses. And I just don't know. So, and I think it has something that a lot of founders experience themselves, that like you, especially with angels, you don't know who is really going to like your proposition, who is going to believe in your vision, and who wants to invest. It's just something you have to approach a lot of people, have to get a lot of meetings, sit with them, have coffee, and figure out if there's a connection personally and business wise on the proposition that you're doing.
Yeah. Do you believe that at such an early stage, personality and the founder, the team are still 80-90% of the success?
Yeah, well, like one thing that you really need is that you need to be enthusiastic about your idea, right? You cannot. So there's all types of angels. So there's probably deals getting done by angels where they don't like the other party, or where they don't have a connection with the startup, but they feel like it's an opportunity or something. But I think the majority of angel deals, you really need to like each other. And especially the angel needs to like the startup. The startup can always think like, I need the money, so I'll change my norms a little bit on how much I like this person, which is obvious. Very often it's advised to against that, but sometimes you're with your back against the wall, and it's the only check that's on the table to avoid bankruptcy. So you might take it. But the other way around, the investor, yeah, like you can invest in so many things. So you need to be excited about the journey. And the best way to get an investor excited about the journey is that you show that excitement yourself, and that you're just like a nice person that has a very interesting journey ahead of him. And you're allowing the investor to participate in that awesome challenge. And I think that's what angels look for mostly. And with VCs, they look more on the potential return and whether it can help their fund perform the way they want it to perform.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned quite a few things that Startup Fountain is not, right? It is just an introduction platform for now. So what is the future? Are you going to add some features that would help you track the investment, maybe help you match the investor and the founder on the platform, and have them meet on the platform, or it's still something that you're not looking for? And also I know that you're not using this success fee, right, as a revenue stream. So why not, and are you planning to introduce it?
Yeah, so it's the stupid reason on why not is because I never liked it in the past. So, and when we were raising with Kiesel, we have signed a lot of success fee kind of deals with parties helping us with fundraising, and it never worked out. And it always felt like even if it works out, then it was too expensive for what they did. They just did an introduction. Excuse me.
That's okay.
They just did an introduction. It wasn't worth the success fee. Well, it was worth it, but it didn't relate to their effort. We just get a sip of water. And yeah, I've just been stubborn at the beginning, thinking I don't want to do a success fee. I want to see if I can just make it like a sign-up fee, which is optional, so both sides can use it as a free tool. But there are some services that I offer for premium. But I am working on introducing like a low success fee. And my goal is to really automate everything, so I don't need to get like a 4 or 6% success fee, and I still don't want it to be a burden to the startups. I think a low success fee will allow me to get to a good amount of revenue, and also allow me to do some nice things with referral marketing, where I share the success fee with others. So that is something that I'm working on introducing. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So what is the biggest win and the biggest failure so far for Startup Fountain?
I think it's a sort of, the win is something that is personal, that is psychological, and maybe even, I don't know if it's sad, but there's this. I spoke with an angel once who had sold his company, and he felt that he had lost his identity in the process, so that he was afterwards, like while he was running the company, he was being invited to all these events. He would walk into a room and people would know him. That's the guy from that company. And he was representing that company. And then he sold all his shares, and he felt like he was no longer getting all the invites. When he walked into a room, he felt like he was a little bit of a nobody. So it's a sad story, but it's something that I think, like when we had to close the Kiesel company, it was sort of this weird time where COVID was about to start. I had just become a parent for the first time, and it felt like so different from what I was used to the years before, that what I really liked, I wasn't looking for it, but what I really liked with Startup Fountain was that I was very quickly back at the table, meeting interesting people in the ecosystem. So I think that is, for me personally, just something that is very positive, that I'm sort of back at the table doing this, and I get to meet like a lot of people, get invited for stuff like this, which I really enjoy, and it just makes you feel like you have a purpose, you contribute something. I get a lot of thanks from startups that really like that I like that I've experienced as a founder myself. They like what I'm trying to fix because they experienced the horrible situation of fundraising, and I like the occasional investor that is also handing out compliments. So yeah, it's but it's still like a puzzle where I want to. It's not a charity event that I do this, so it's something that I want to monetize and scale and make big.
Sure.
But yeah, in the process, I really enjoy this. The negative thing is that everything takes long, as always. So because of the fact that got a daughter during COVID, and I'm just in a different life cycle moment than I was before. My risk appetite is different, so I do paid freelance work on the side as well, which is also very nice, but it's also very necessary because I at the moment I had quite some debt coming out of the Kiesel bankruptcy, so I was really not in the position to make any demands towards my girlfriend that I wanted to do another adventure making no money at all. So I need to balance it now, and that is frustrating and negative at times, that I cannot go as fast as I can. But yeah, I still enjoy it. It's something that I need to manage.
It definitely looks like it. I mean, honestly, when I saw your like everything you were doing on LinkedIn, you know, providing all this like super useful information, and how you also put your story out there on the Startup Fountain, I thought that was super inspiring. That's why, you know, I reached out in the first place. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being honest about your story. So what would be your best advice to the first-time founders?
Yeah, I think one thing is always consider not fundraising. Consider if there is a path where you can focus more heavily on getting revenue, getting customers to pay, especially like don't wait too long trying to charge customers to pay. If they don't pay, then there's a big risk that you're spending time on something they don't really want if it's only free. So that's something that I try to introduce fairly quickly as well, finding ways to monetize, seeing how I can get money out of it, because otherwise it's just your dream that you're building. So, and if you find ways to monetize properly, then you may not need to spend all that time fundraising, and that way you can you remain free, you get all your freedom, and you don't and you can focus more time on building your product and growing your revenue. So I think that is something that, especially with I'm so addicted, unfortunately, to LinkedIn, and it always looks like everybody is raising 20 million overnight, and that it's in a breeze doing that process. But also, if I talk to founders that did like big rounds, like a multi-million-dollar rounds, and raised apparently easily, then when I ask them, they say, well, we had about 40 meetings, or we had 80 meetings to get that round to close, and it looks like it's in one message. It happened now, but it was a lot of hard work over the past 12 months. So it's never as easy as it seems, and you might get the idea that it's easy. And I think LinkedIn is in that sense like Instagram. It makes everybody else look wonderful, and you feel pathetic about your own efforts. But it's like you just focus on revenue, which is a much better metric to focus on than on fundraising. And but sometimes fundraising is needed to go faster or to get somewhere at all.
Right. No, thank you so much. I mean, absolutely. I think you're 100% right about focusing on revenue, focusing on, you know, what you're actually making. And if fundraising is not something you're looking for, then it's also okay. And I guess, LinkedIn can make you feel less of a founder if you're not pursuing fundraising, but I think it's not for everybody. You're absolutely correct. So thank you so much for telling your story. It is amazing. It is super inspiring, and it's super great that you're back on your feet with your identity and at the table. And here it's great having you here. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the hour. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I hope we can do it again sometime.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Friso, and take care. Bye.
Bye.